I am completely debating whether or not I am going to post this up. But I'm going to do my best to have the bravery to do so. In case you're wondering, I am neither at the center nor am I at home on the coronavirus couch. I am here in my father's garage. I'm here taking care of my dad, making sure he's cool, and also sort of pre-gaming, sitting Shiva for my mother, who is back in the hospital and has gone DNR and is now off of therapeutic remedies. No more dialysis, probably no more diabetes care, what they call comfort care only. I am pre-gaming, getting a phone call. I'll go down with their later on with Dad tomorrow morning. It's still Valentine's Day here in San Diego. I'm sitting here in one of her favorite chairs where she used to sit when my dad was over there cleaning fish, when Dad could still get out to the lake and catch fish. It is a chair that she will never again be privileged to sit in. This chair that has been in our family since they bought this house in 1975. I think they bought it from Montgomery Ward. She was so proud of that whole new living room set. This chair used to be in the living room. 45 years later, it's in the garage. I am wearing a shirt that says love because it's Valentine's Day. It should also say legacy. I want to talk about Black History Month, and I will. But as much as we want to talk about Black history, we also need to tie it to Black present, looking out there, and Black future. I am surrounded by Black heroes my entire life. My namesake, Lacey May Broadnax, a Black history hero. She cleaned people's houses and then she came home and she worked on her garden. And the reason she cleaned houses was to make sure that her daughter wouldn't stay in Camden, Arkansas, but would instead go to school in St. Louis, the big city. And my other grandmother, Beatrice Plummer, who also cleaned houses, taking care of 7 children on her own, who birthed her first son, my father Hubert, who lied about his age at 16 so he could join the Navy and help put his 4 sisters through college and his 4 brothers through either college or technical school. All 4 sisters have done great things in academics, in education, K through 12, in nursing. All 3 brothers either owned their own businesses or were respected employees in their field. My grandfather, Luttrell, who cleaned the post office in Ouachita County because he wasn't allowed to be a postal carrier. And then he'd come home and he'd work his land. I am the product of all of that. So as much as we talk about love, let's also talk about legacy. Let's talk about the ones who have gone, everyday heroes, all over the place. Let's talk about my mother, who is going to die very soon. But I believe that roses should be given when people can still smell them. Right now, my mother would not register smelling roses. Right now, she is, as my father said earlier today, when he went to go see her, a shell. She does not have long. She will never come back to this house. This is the legacy of the mother of a cult leader. There are some amazing things that have happened to me and to Layson Race in the last few weeks, things I couldn't tell her, and that she's not going to know. She's not going to know that I'm going to be presenting at a seminary next week. Leading with Hesed heart. A lot of that presentation will be infused with the woman who sat in this chair for 45 years. She's not going to know that her little daughter, her Jan, her stinker, is going to be presenting up in Canada to a governmental agency, taking the message on of Layson Race into some pretty high echelons. She's not going to know that her daughter was accepted to a full scholarship at the same seminary she's presenting at next week. If I accept the offer, I'll be part of the September cohort, and in 4 years I'll have my Master's of Divinity. Although she'd be happy for me, just like Dad. They're not going to be, they wouldn't have been over the moon. Dad, I told Dad all this news, and it's like, what is it that you do anyway? You just write and talk. Well, yeah, Dad, that's pretty much it. Write and talk and abide and think and research. But to my dad, whose hands were caked every day with grease and sweat. There ain't no grease underneath your nails. You ain't done a day's work. Sort of the same with my mom, but with her it was chalk and Elmer's glue. If you didn't ride herd on 15 special ed kids in a day, was it work? Well, the living legend that is my father, who was one of the first black men to integrate the post-Civil War, the post-World War II, he ain't that old, the post-World War II Navy, when back in the day all black men were allowed to do was be scrub and grub. Custodian or cook. He was one of the first black men chosen to be on the flight deck. And he became, without question, one of the best sheet metal men the Navy has ever seen. They called him Doc Watkins because there wasn't anything he couldn't do on a plane. His claim to fame that he will tell you often is that as a man who got in there in the guts and as a supervisor, there was never a plane that he touched or signed off on that failed. All of this during the late 50s and early 60s, when people would hide his tools, sabotage his work, spit on him, so that he could become Doc Watkins, so that his daughter could think and write and abide. I've been with him more or less all the time this last week. And the other day, when he was saying, Jan, tell me what you do again. It was to keep his mind off of what was going on with my mother. And so I got my phone and I showed him a couple of videos. And he got it. And he how come you never showed me these before? That ain't bad, Jan. That's all right. My mom did something very similar, maybe about 6 or 7 months ago. She has been touch and go for the last year and a half. And she really doesn't have a full idea of what I do. But I got her on the Layson Race Cafe and I registered her. And it's just kind of, you do all this for us? Yeah, Bobbye. I do it for you. And for Aunt Kathy. And for Madeline Foster. And for Margaret Terrell. Friends of my mom's. All living legends. all living legends. There are living legends all over you, all over the place. And so for every person that we are going to celebrate during Black History Month, there are angels walking among you. Some of them are gone, and I look forward to the idea of Lacey May Broadnax with snuff right here, because in heaven, God gives her snuff, waiting for my mama when she comes very soon. And they're going to sit there on the back porch where the wringer washer is that she was so very proud of. She was still using that wringer washer when I was a senior in high school. And in the front porch, there'll be Luttrell Broadnax, my grandfather, sitting there, rocking and smoking cherry tobacco in his pipe. Another living legend. He's going to be thinking about his other 3 children that have passed. Living legends, pioneers, all of them. My Uncle Al, who was a roughneck on the oil rigs outside Houston. James Pace, who could make anything out of wood, and who was a woodworker and a mill worker for 40 years. He died earlier this year, leaving my mother as the last surviving Pace Broadnax. My Auntie Gloria, who lived a very quiet life in Camden, but who raised a nurse and a Navy man. It is absolutely important that we reach back and look at the history of the notables. But we need to say something about the notables that does not at all take away from their achievements and their accomplishments. For every notable, for everyone that made it into the history books, there's 1,000, more than 1,000, 1,000,000 who did not, whose names you will never know, who took huge risks on behalf of their people and on behalf of America. That's a big deal. And I think about this as I think about the fact that COVID restrictions only allow my mother to have 1 visitor a day. So I haven't seen her in a week since she fell just outside here and hit her head. And they're not sure whether or not the stroke that she endured was because of the fall or because she fell because she had the stroke. Let me tell you, I don't do this work for Daniel Werner. I do it to honor Bobbye Watkins, who would not drink orangeade. She would think of that as a kid's drink, but something that she hasn't had in over 20 years since she was diagnosed with diabetes. Full sugar Pepsi. That's my mom's drink of choice. For my grandmother, it wouldn't have been orangeade. It would have been coffee so thick you could chew it. And no amount of milk, and believe me, I've tried, no amount of milk could water it down. For my grandfather, it would be a beer whose brand I don't know, but it was regional to Arkansas in the South, sitting there nursing his beer for an hour while he smoked his pipe and while he used to let me sit right next to him. And I'd babble. And my grandfather, who was basically deaf, he'd say this after our little sessions on the front porch. I don't know what she said, but I sure like hearing her say it. We'd do that every day when we went back every summer to Arkansas. And he'd let me babble and talk. And he'd just be sitting there with love in his eyes, encouraging. Say it again, Jan. And I would. I'm comfortable speaking and talking and relating and communicating and abiding because of that porch time with Luttrell Broadnax. I'm comfortable turning a phrase because of the eagle eye of Bobbye Watkins, who read every essay and gave it more red marks than my teacher did. I cannot fix a plane, but what I can do is I can give the kind of rough justice relational ethics that my father gives, hopefully with a little less profanity. But another thing about my father that you should know, this man who endured so much in his early career in the Navy became a chief at the age of 40, but only before the Navy made him get his high school diploma, because he had only gone to 10th grade. And they said, we want to make you a chief, but you got to have a diploma. So at the age of 38 and 39, my dad finished his high school diploma. And I don't know how, but the Navy had some radical, and I do mean radical, political science teachers circa 1974 to 1976. And I would read his books and we'd talk about them. And the man is brilliant. I got my political sensibilities from Hubert Watkins. I got my ability to synthesize and analyze from the sheet metal mechanic. I got my inability to not call a thing from Hubert, who was calling a thing long before blessed Ian Van Zandt. And we would fight and argue and point at books like this. And I would type up his papers because, he did go to school, but he never learned to type. And I would be amazed at what the man was saying. The words were misspelled, a lot of them. He still can't spell Lacy. It's Lacy. But the thoughts were brilliant. And it brings me to wonder about the brilliance that has been lost because of white supremacy, whiteness, and racism. I am so glad that my father was a pioneer for the Navy as a mechanic. But let's tell the truth, the man should have and could have been an engineer. Or he should have and could have been a public servant. Or he could have or should have been a political commentator for the New York Times. They would have to edit out the cuss words, but you get what I'm saying. For every person that we have lauded and affirmed and held up from emancipation and before emancipation to the present, there are thousands and millions whose names we will never know. I remember one thing my father, a dedicated Navy man, told me. I guess I was in high school, and I was talking about revolution and being kind of disrespectful of the fact that my father was a career Navy man. By that time, he was a civil servant, but he still worked on the flight deck. And I was talking about revolution, and I was talking about resistance, and a very uninformed and condescending form of pacifism. And at one point, my daddy looked me straight in the eye and said, well, goddamn, Jan, I'm a black man waking up every morning. It's a revolutionary act. That stopped me cold. That is why I do what I do. That is why I am hopefully fearless in what I say. My father was a revolutionary every day of his life. My father changed the course of an integrated Navy, along with other men, but my father changed the course of an integrated Navy. My mother, who picketed on behalf of classified workers in San Diego Unified School District, changed the trajectory of Black people in education. I can do no less. So while we are thinking about the people who have made it into the history books, we need to think about the legions of people who did not. But they're among us, and their accomplishments, achievements, and legacy continue and endure. I can do no less. You'll see it on a comment thread. But there's this guy, I have blocked his name for some reason, but you'll see it. who was asking, what have I done for racial justice this Valentine's Day? Yeah, he asked me that. And I said, well, hopefully leading and being a good daughter, leading my staff, leading this community, and being a good daughter to Bobbye and Hubert. That's what I've done this Valentine's Day. It is amazing the contempt that people feel they can level on me. And this time a year ago, when Mom was in and out of hospitals and nursing homes, and I had been blindsided, I was so tentative and so afraid, because I was so afraid of losing you. Not anymore. Not anymore. Nuh-uh. I am sitting in the garage of a man who was a revolutionary. Every day he woke up, inculcated that into his youngest daughter. I can't really clean a fish. Yeah, no, that part of Hubert's legacy can stay Hubert's legacy, but I'll take everything else. So if people want to spit on me like they spit on my father, if people want to sabotage this community like they tried to sabotage my father's planes, you try. If people want to be condescending and indulge themselves in misogyny and misogynoir, like they did with my mother in San Diego Unified School District, you go right ahead. I don't do it for you. I do it for the lady who sat in this chair, and her mother, and her husband, and her husband's mother, and everyone who came before me who lifted me up. That's legacy, y'all. If any of this offends you or alienates you, I never had you anyway. If you can't find it in yourself to celebrate my parents, who are a microcosm of the African American experience, education, and the military, then this place is not for you. If you don't want to support a place that supports the legacy of the Hubert and Bobbye Watkins endowment fund, funded by the Sonis family, then this place is not for you. If you do not want to see this place continue to live out the legacy of Hubert's garage, this place is not for you. I love my parents. They are complicated, curmudgeonly people who have made me leave this house in tears. But they gave me so much. And if the only person I make another video for is Hubert Watkins, so he can, well, goddamn, Jan, that ain't bad. If that's the only person who says that to me, I'll keep doing it. I will keep honoring not only the legacy, but the charge that I have been given. I've cleaned toilets and swept floors in restaurants and grocery stores when I was a job coach, teaching people how to do rudimentary skills. And I remember I was at the Del Taco. That's where I learned to love Del Taco. The Del Taco at North Island Naval Air Station, where my dad was second shift for years and years and years. And I was in there with one of my job coach clients. This was when I was in my early mid-20s. So let's just say it was 1986 or 1987. And my dad happened to be at Del Taco that day. Usually he took his lunch. But that day, the man decided to go into Del Taco. And here I am with my client, teaching my client how to scrub a toilet. And he walks into the men's bathroom, and all I could hear was, well, goddamn, Jan, what the hell's going on? And I introduced him to my client, and then I told him that I was teaching this skill, and the only way I could teach it was to do it in case you guys are wondering, direct connection to what we do here on Lace on Race. And he looked at the toilet, and he looked at me. And he looked at the toilet, and he looked at me. Well, goddamn, Jane, if you're gonna clean that toilet, you clean it the best of your ability. And then he told me to get me and my client the hell out of there so that he could take a pee. That's Hubert. And I did. That's legacy, y'all. Of course, he told Mom about it when he came home. I want to end this with Bobbye. Bobbye spent a lot of money, untold amounts of money, on educational supplies that San Diego Unified would not provide to her and the kids that they thought were throwaway, because they sort of did back in the 70s and the 80s. Let's not lie. And she would go to Lakeshore and Chula Vista, later on in Mission Valley. She would go to other educational places. She would go to Fedco. She would get extra supplies. That was sacrificial of her. My parents, by the time I was in junior high and high school, they weren't poor. They started off poor, but they weren't poor by then. What they weren't, though, was they were not upper middle class by any means. They were solidly working class folks who managed to scrape up enough to buy this 1,200 square foot house that they have lived in since 1975. So when my mother pulled out her checkbook, not a credit card, her checkbook, to buy these supplies, I was usually right there with her. She taught me about sacrifice and about doing more than what's expected. And about this, another legacy of Bobbye Watkins, that her buying all these supplies did not mean she loved me less. Her buying those supplies didn't take food out of my mouth or make me have one less toy in my cupboard. Later on, as I got older, one less lip gloss. But it did cost her. It did. My mom had a pair of shoes, square-toed with a buckle. High heels, because, it's Bobbye, high heels. She got them resold every year. Every year. We'd go to the same shoe store with the deaf guy who ran the shoe store, and she would point at her sole, and he would go like this, and 3 days later, she'd pick up the shoes with the new sole. She wore those shoes almost nonstop for 10 years. And Joy and I used to sort of joke about it at her expense. There's Mom in the witch's shoes again. Yeah, we can always find her. Just look down. We can see the witch's shoes. But she bought those shoes and wore them for 10 years and got them resold every year so that she could do for us and for her students. Her students were her North Star. Those students that everybody else thought couldn't learn. That was where Bobbye lived. The apocryphal story is that she did gifted education for a while, and then she had me for half a year and said she'd never do gifted education again. So she went to special ed. And I went to Mrs. Thomas, another Black history hero. All of this to say that heroism and loving on and affirming and lifting up and honoring and acknowledging the amazing work that Black people have done should not be confined to 1 month or to only one cohort of people. And I'm going to say this carefully, but I'm going to say it that white people have decided are deserving of accolade. Because, let's face it, there is power beyond that. And it's part of the power dynamic of racial justice that in so many ways white people drive it. We'll talk about that later too. But for now, I'm going to say goodnight to you and happy Valentine's Day. And then I'm going to go check on my dad. And then I'm going to pray for my mom. Right now, she's a living legacy. She won't be for long. So give my mother roses today.